When I first started watching ReZero, I hated Subaru, not because he was weak, but because he instantly believed that being transported into another world made him the hero. In his mind, it gave him automatic access to Amelia, the right to force himself into her life and treat suffering as proof that he was special. So when season 1 destroyed him for it, I thought the story was agreeing with me. But the longer I watched, the more I realized something uncomfortable. I hated Subaru because I was judging his worth the same way he did. With season 4 part 2 on the horizon, I thought this was the perfect time to revisit the entire series from the beginning, and since ReZero has spent 4 seasons proving that nobody can get it done alone, it would mean a lot to me if you subscribe and join me as I cover part 2 weekly. ReZero didn't prove me wrong by making Subaru less flawed, it proved me wrong by changing what those flaws meant. His growth was never about becoming useful enough to deserve love. It was about learning that his life still mattered, even when he failed or couldn't save everyone. And ironically, the moment he stopped trying to prove he was the hero, he finally became one. This is how ReZero made me hate Subaru, then proved me wrong. The first reason Subaru is so hard to like at the start of ReZero is because he thinks he is the main character when really he is only the main character to us. To be fair, it's not a crazy assumption for him to make. If you were suddenly transported into a fantasy world and instantly were met by knights, magic, and mysterious silver-haired elves, you'd probably also think you're him. But the fact that Subaru isn't him is something that ReZero relentlessly attacks almost immediately. When Subaru first arrives, he does not treat this world seriously. He treats it like an isekai dream come true instead of a real place with real danger. He assumes that this is the moment he has been waiting for. His boring old life of reading doujinshi after visiting the convenience store is finally going to be replaced with an exciting fantasy adventure where he matters most as its star. And that is the main issue. Subaru is not annoying at the start because he is weak. Don't get it twisted. Being weak is not the issue. The later seasons even prove that Subaru can be a weak protagonist and still be easy to root for. But Subaru of season 1 is annoying because he gets transported into another world and immediately starts acting as if that means the world is all about him. Season 1 though had no interest in giving Subaru his perfect fantasy because nearly straight away Subaru is humbled, jumped by common street thugs, not some demon lord, not some legendary knight, but fodder, and he even needs Shorty to step in and help him. That should already tell you a lot about the type of story ReZero is going to be. Subaru is only imagining himself as the hero of this world, but from the very beginning he is not the one saving the princess. The princess is the one saving him. Don't even get me started with the loot house. ReZero really made it a point to ensure that we know Subaru ain't crap in this world. Not yet. This is where Elsa the baddie enters the story, and Subaru is completely outmatched. He was already struggling against common street thugs, and now against Elsa. Dear Lord, there could not be a better way to tell him that he is not ready for this world at all. He is scared, confused, and constantly being thrown into death loop after death loop against someone so superior to him. And that is when you realize Return by Death is not some cool, overpowered ability. He can't even go on a training arc, bust out 10,000 hours worth of sword swings, die, and come back a sword master, because his body resets every time. So even his power does not actually make him stronger in the way a normal power fantasy would. Obviously, the ability is useful because it gives Subaru essentially eternal life, but emotionally, that ish is scary. His power will never stop him from being weak. Really, it just forces him to experience the consequences of his weakness over and over again. This is what makes ReZero different from the power fantasy that Subaru thought he was transported into. This world is dangerous. It does not give a damn about his confidence, and it definitely does not give a damn that he thinks he is supposed to be its protagonist. Even in episode 3, when Subaru becomes a store merchant and actually does contribute against Elsa, the situation is only truly resolved once Reinhardt, the real hero, arrives. And this moment is particularly important because the story is not saying Subaru is useless. I'm not saying Subaru is useless. That's not the point. Subaru can be brave. He can care about people. He can throw himself into danger even when he is is terrified. And honestly, those are some of his best qualities. But bravery and kindness alone do not make him the hero he imagines himself to be. When Reinhard shows up, the gap becomes undeniably obvious. That is what a real hero looks like in this world. Someone with the ability to resolve these situations. Subaru, at this point, is nowhere near that level. He is a guy who so desperately wants the role of the hero before he has gained the humility that role requires. And that is Season 1 Subaru's problem. There is a huge gap between who he thinks he is and who he actually is. In his mind, transporting to another world meant finally becoming the guy. But in reality, it does not magically erase the fact that he is weak and immature, that he is constantly surviving because someone stronger or more capable is there to help him. Which, by the way, does not make him a bad character. It makes him a frustrating one. And that frustration is important because the humility he needs is something that can only come through experience. ReZero is not just going to humble Subaru physically, it is going to keep tearing down the fantasy that he has of himself until there is nothing left for him to hide behind, while we are forced to sit through every excruciating step of it. Now, this is where Season 1 starts to get really painful. Subaru becomes even harder to watch because the story starts exposing his flaws as something genuinely ugly. His bravery is real, his loyalty is real, his love for Emilia is real, but so is his ego, his entitlement, and his desperation to be seen as important. That is what makes the middle of Season 1 hard to sit through. At this point, Subaru is not just embarrassing himself, he starts dragging other people into his fantasy. The clearest example of this is the royal selection. This is the moment Subaru decides to participate in the Make It All About Myself challenge, because Emilia specifically told him not to involve himself, but he does it anyway. And if that wasn't bad enough already, Subaru is not just chiming into a random conversation, he is inserting himself into one of the highest stakes political situations this world has to offer, despite barely understanding anything about it. This is not a group project where he can just wing it. Heck, it's not even a group project that he is a part of. This is the royal selection. This is Emilia's future, something that will define her reputation and that she has to carry with her forever. But Subaru casually walks in with all that main character energy without any of the main character traits. To make matters worse, he publicly declares himself as her knight. It is indeed a noble gesture, but doing that in front of every knight in Lagunica is insane. He has not earned that position, and clearly, he does not understand what that position actually represents. This is where Subaru's desire to be the hero stops being noble and starts becoming harmful. He thinks he is bravely defending Emilia, but really, he is forcing himself into her story because he wants to be important to her. And it hurts to say because he genuinely does care about her. That is what makes it complicated. Subaru's love for Emilia is far from fake, but his love is so dangerously entangled with his ego that he can't separate protecting Emilia from needing to be seen as her protector. That is why this moment is so frustrating. He claims he is doing this for her, but he is not actually listening to her. He wants to stand beside her so badly that he ends up making her situation worse. And then Julius pulls up. Brother, this was a tough watch. After Subaru pretty much insulted the entire royal guard by declaring himself a knight and kept acting like he was worthy of the title, Julius challenged him to a duel. He was not having it and completely dismantled him. I'm talking belt to ass in front of everyone. The homies, the ladies, even Emilia. This fight is Subaru's pride getting beaten out of him in the most literal sense. And as brutal as it is, Julius becomes Subaru's biggest reality check yet. He wants to be recognized as Emilia's knight, but Julius shows him that there are levels to this. There is a huge difference between wanting a title and actually being worthy of it. In other words, Subaru wants the respect and emotional validation that comes with being Emilia's knight, but he does not yet have the discipline and humility that the role requires. So instead of looking heroic, he looks like the complete opposite. He looks small, he looks immature, he looks completely out of his element. And that is why episode 13 is probably the most excruciating episode of season 1 to watch. Subaru can't afford to be goofy. This is not him being a little bit weird in his own way. It is his worst traits being put on full display in the most humiliating way possible. His fight with Julius was pretty bad, but honestly, the argument with Emilia might have been even worse. After that royal selection disaster class, Subaru starts listing every little thing he has done for Emilia, almost expecting her to understand the loops and suffering he has gone through for her, which is ridiculous. But that is the tragedy of Subaru's situation. From his perspective, he has suffered endlessly for the people he cares about. He has died over and over again. He has to carry memories that nobody else will ever remember. So to him, it feels like he has gone to hell and back for Emilia. But from her perspective, Subaru is lashing out for no reason. He is someone she recently met, and yet he embarrassed her in public, ignored her wishes, and then started demanding credit for the things he did for her that she could not possibly know happened. And it is that gap in perspective that makes him so frustrating to watch. Subaru's pain is real, but he starts acting as if that pain automatically justifies anything he does. He reeks of desperation, and it is this same desperation that becomes even clearer when he tries to get help from the other candidates. He wants people to trust him, and yet he cannot give them a good reason why. He wants people to take action quickly, and yet he cannot properly explain what he knows. It is no wonder he comes off as unstable and impossible to trust. This is probably the roughest version of Subaru that you will ever have to sit through. The story does not pretend Subaru's suffering is meaningless, but it also does not let Subaru use that suffering as an excuse to make the world revolve around him. By this point, rezero is not just humbling Subaru physically, it is humbling him psychologically and emotionally too, shattering the fantasy that he has of himself. The fantasy that being an isekai protagonist automatically means that he is special, that he should be trusted and respected. The story forces us to sit through the worst version of him, not because it wants us to hate him forever, but because his eventual growth feels so much more earned and satisfying when we understand exactly what needs to change. Subaru does not just need to become stronger, he needs to become humble enough to admit that he is not entitled to love, trust, or understanding just because he suffered. Wanting to become someone's hero does not mean you have earned the right to be one. And all this is exactly why episode 18 hits as hard as it does. This is the point where Subaru finally becomes easier to root for. Not because he suddenly becomes cool, and definitely not because the story pretends all of his worst moments never happened. He becomes easier to root for because he finally stops trying to be the hero and admits the truth to himself. He is weak, he is insecure, and yeah, he hates himself. It is in this episode that Subaru completely loses it in front of Rem and for the first time says out loud everything that the season has been forcing us to watch. He hates how he runs away. He hates that he makes excuses and still expects people to see something special in him. The reason this moment works so well is because it does not come out of nowhere. We have already seen Subaru at his worst. So when he finally breaks down and admits that he hates himself, it does not feel random. It feels like the truth is finally coming out. And that is why episode 18 is so powerful. Not because Rem simply makes Subaru feel better, but it is powerful because Subaru finally admits that the version of himself that we have been watching cannot be the future. Now it is Rem's time to shine. She does not sweep Subaru's flaws under the rug. She does not sit there and pretend he is perfect, that those really ugly moments of his never happened. Instead, she listens to Subaru at his lowest and still chooses to believe in the version of him that is worth saving. And yes, this is a large reason why most people think Rem is best girl. Not me, Emilia or Day. But seriously though, what Rem does here really matters. She reminds Subaru that even though he sees himself as worthless, that is not the only version of him that exists. There is still a version of him that saved people, that stood up even when he was terrified, that despite hating himself still wanted to do something good. And that is why From Zero matters. It is not Rem magically fixing Subaru. It is not Subaru getting rewarded for pretending to be strong. It is Subaru being given the courage to keep trying and stop defining himself only by his worst traits. That is the difference. Up until this point, Subaru has either tried to act like he was special or completely lost it over the fact that he was not. Like, calm down, Subaru. You're not Reinhard, buddy. You're not that guy. But episode 18 gives him another path. He does not have to be the perfect hero. He does not have to be Reinhard. He simply needs to start again from zero instead of acting like he has a leg up in this world. And after that episode, you can actually feel the difference in how Subaru starts moving throughout the rest of the season. He might still be weak and flawed. He might still not suddenly be some overpowered isekai protagonist, but he starts acting with a humility we had not really seen before. Instead of demanding trust, he starts building it. Instead of forcing himself into the lone hero role, he starts relying on other people. He works works with Krush, Anastasia, and even Julius, the same man who completely sunned him in front of everyone. And that matters most, because it shows that Subaru has genuinely changed. The old Subaru wanted people to recognize him as important before he earned anything, but the new Subaru starts to build real trust through action. He helps form a plan to take down the white whale. He helps move the story forward, not by acting like the strongest person in the room, but by understanding how he can actually contribute. Planning, teamwork, persistence, these are things no one can take away from him. This is where Subaru starts becoming truly strong in his own way, and that is why the final stretch of season 1 is so satisfying, and why I finally shifted my opinion on Subaru. It works so well because he finally accepted what he is not, and used what he actually has, rather than trying to be someone completely different overnight. He may not be the chosen one he imagined himself to be, but he can still be useful. He can still be brave. He can still choose to stand back up after being completely broken. This entire journey across season 1 makes his growth feel genuinely earned. Subaru starting from zero matters because it does not erase how insufferable he was before. It reframes it. Season 1 needed us to see the absolute worst version of Subaru so that when he finally chooses humility, it does not feel automatic. It feels like something he had to suffer for and actively choose. That is why season 1 hits so much harder in hindsight. It made me frustrated with Subaru on purpose. It made me sit through all the ego, entitlement, and Subaru just plain hating himself, so that when he finally stopped pretending to be the hero and chose to start again from zero, I actually wanted to root for him. But starting from zero only changed how Subaru tried to save everyone else. It didn't change what he believed his own life was worth. When Rem was erased and the sanctuary and mansion started overwhelming him, Subaru became obsessed with finding the perfect route where everyone survived, even if he had to die over and over to reach it. He had finally learned to value everyone except himself. The first way Season 2 Part 1 challenges the idea of the perfect route is by showing how easily Subaru's trauma can be transformed into information. At this point, return by death is no longer just a curse Subaru is forced to carry. It is becoming a method he relies on, and that is what makes Season 2 Part 1 feel so much more disturbing than Season 1. Subaru starts treating death less like a tragedy and more like a tool. If something goes wrong, he can die. If he lacks information, he can die. If the current route fails, he can die and simply search for a better one. That is where the danger lies. Subaru's suffering is no longer just pain he has to endure. Death has somehow become useful, which is why Echidna is such a dangerous character. She did not create this mindset in Subaru. This way of thinking was already there. Return by death has already started to change the way Subaru views his own life. But Echidna enables this mindset. She gives Subaru the comfort of finally feeling understood, and then uses that comfort to treat his trauma as something valuable to study. We see this danger almost immediately after Rem is erased. Subaru's first instinct is to end his own life and force a different outcome. On one hand, it proves how deeply he cares about Rem. She was the one who pulled him out of his lowest point in Season 1. She was the one who stayed with him even when he hated himself. So when she is put into a coma and everyone forgets her, even Ram, it makes sense that Subaru breaks. But on the other hand, the most disturbing part is how quickly he turns to death as the answer. He does not pause and think of death as the final dreaded outcome anymore. Death is the method, and that shows how much return by death has already damaged the way he thinks. Because Subaru's love for Rem is real, but the pursuit of the ideal outcome has distorted that love into self-destruction. He's not just trying to save someone, he believes that his own death is an acceptable price to save another person from theirs. Season 2 Part 1 is not just about whether or not Subaru can save Rem, it is about how far gone Subaru is, that death becomes the first solution he reaches for. And then Episode 8 takes it even further, when Subaru tells Echidna about return by death. I get it. At first, this moment honestly feels like relief for him. For so long, Subaru's trauma has been locked inside him. He has died, suffered, and reset over and over again, remembering all of it with not even a single person who could truly understand what he has gone through. So for the very first time, when someone listens, when Echidna listens, it almost feels comforting. Subaru finally gets to say the one thing he has never been allowed to say, but that very comfort is the trap, because Echidna does not respond to Subaru's trauma the way a normal person would. She is fascinated by it. She sees return by death as something incredible because of how much knowledge she could gain from it. Subaru's trauma becomes valuable because it gives her access to knowledge no one else could ever have. Echidna might have given Subaru the emotional release he so desperately needed, but she also encourages the exact mindset that made Subaru need that emotional release in the first place. To her, every death can teach him something. To her, every failed route becomes useful information for the next. To her, every bit of pain is simply another stepping stone on the path to the ideal outcome. That is where the idea of the perfect route becomes truly terrifying. Subaru's suffering becomes part of the strategy. Then episode 12 takes the idea even further with Subaru's second trial, one of the most devastating psychological attacks in season 2 part 1. It introduces the possibility that Subaru's failed timelines might actually continue after he dies, and that completely changes the emotional weight of return by death. Before this, Subaru could view his deaths as personal sacrifices. He might die, he might suffer, he might remember, but in the end, everyone else gets saved in the successful route. So in Subaru's mind, the pain is worth it because the final timeline is the only one that matters. But the second trial challenges that comfort. It suggests that every failed route might actually be him leaving behind his loved ones, leaving behind people who grieved him, people who needed him, people who had to keep living in a world without him. It exposes the real problem with the perfect route. Subaru's deaths are no longer his burden alone. His deaths might already be creating abandoned worlds full of grief, confusion, and trauma. So season 2 part 1 forces us to question whether chasing the ideal outcome is truly worth it, if every attempt leaves behind the same trauma Subaru is trying to save everyone from. Through Echidna, season 2 part 1 shows the first danger of chasing the perfect route. Trauma can become information. Subaru's pain starts becoming useful, his deaths start becoming strategic, and Echidna becomes especially dangerous because she validates that way of thinking. That is why the question is no longer just whether or not Subaru can reach the perfect route. The real question is what happens to Subaru's humanity when suffering becomes part of the strategy. Now, this is where Roswaal becomes very important and shows us the second danger of chasing the perfect route. If Echidna shows the first danger of trauma becoming information, Roswaal shows the second danger of love becoming obsession. Roswaal challenges the perfect route by showing Subaru what happens when love becomes so obsessed with one ideal future that everyone else is reduced to sacrificial lambs. It is this psychological warfare that makes Roswaal one of the most intriguing characters in season 2 part 1. Even before this season, he was always sus. From the moment he was introduced, he always felt like somebody who knew way more than he was letting on. But season 2 part 1 is where he stops that suspicious clown act completely and becomes an undeniable warning for Subaru. The scariest thing about Roswaal isn't only that he manipulates people, it is that his manipulation has actual logic behind it. He has a future that he wants, he has something he refuses to let go of. And because of that, he is willing to treat everyone else around him as pawns on a chessboard. He does not cause pain because he enjoys being cruel. He is cruel because he has convinced himself that it is a necessity, that if it leads to the future that he wants, then all the pain, trauma, and sacrifices are justified in the end. And that makes him a distorted possible future for Subaru. Because Subaru also has a future that he wants. He also has people and things that he loves dearly. He also believes that suffering can be endured if it leads to the ideal outcome. But it is Roswaal that shows us what that mindset looks like when it is already too far gone. When when love has gotten out of hand, when devotion has decayed into possessiveness. And we start to see this from the moment Subaru and Emilia arrive at the sanctuary. The most dangerous thing about Roswaal is not that his obsession is chaotic, it is actually terrifyingly organized. By the time Subaru and Emilia meet Roswaal, the dire situation around them has already been shaped by Roswaal himself. He understands that Subaru's desperation to save the sanctuary, Emilia, and the mansion can be used to push Subaru towards the choice that Roswaal wants him to make. So not only is his manipulation logical, it is also terrifyingly quiet. Roswaal does not even need to directly attack Subaru because he has already designed the necessary conditions to trap him between impossible choices. That is a whole different kind of villainy. A lot of villains will try to break you by overpowering you. Elsa does it physically, but Roswaal does it psychologically by making Subaru feel as if there is no choice but to act according to the strategy Roswaal has laid out. The craziest thing is that Roswaal's obsession was not loud until now. There were always hints that something was wrong, but season 2 part 1 is where the mask really starts slipping. And it makes him so dangerous because his devotion to the ideal future written in his book has turned into second nature manipulation. Episode 13 makes this lack of humanity impossible to ignore because he is probably the most villainous thing this bastard Roswaal has ever done. He endlessly pushes Subaru towards the idea that he cannot save everyone. It is impossible. He has to focus on one ideal outcome even if other people have to be sacrificed. It is either the sanctuary or the mansion. Roswaal wants so desperately for Subaru to accept that choosing one absolutely means abandoning the other. It is easy to say that Roswaal is simply opposing Subaru as the villain, but it's more than that. He is trying to shape Subaru into someone like himself. He wants Subaru to understand that true devotion means choosing one singular goal and letting everything else burn for the sake of it. And that is exactly where love becomes obsession. Roswaal is not only trying to win, he is trying to drag Subaru into his worldview. Love is supposed to will the good of the other, but Roswaal's love has become so obsessive that it is really all about himself. People are no longer people. They are variables to consider. They are pieces to move. They are sacrifices to be made. That is the exact danger Subaru is being warned about through Roswaal. Of course Subaru wants the perfect route because he wants to save the people he loves. But if he starts thinking like Roswaal, then saving one person can become an excuse to abandon everyone else. He is saying something Subaru is afraid might be true. Maybe he can't save everyone. Maybe love means choosing who matters most. That is why Roswaal is so dangerous. He is not just wrong, he is tempting Subaru with the darkest answer to his biggest fear. And season 2 part 1 portrays that idea in the most disgusting way, with the clearest example being Subaru and Emilia kissing for the very first time. It should have been something that had us jumping for joy. Their first kiss should have felt like a major step forward in their relationship, but instead it happens in one of the most broken timelines. Subaru is literally dying. Emilia has lost her mind, and the moment is so tragic because it is nearly unrecognizable as love. That is why it is one of my favorite scenes in season 2 part 1 by far. On paper, Subaru and Emilia finally kiss, but emotionally, it's just wrong. It's disturbing, and it is undeniable proof of how dangerous Roswaal's worldview really is. If the perfect route requires people to be mentally destroyed, physically broken, and emotionally isolated, then can the perfect route really be called perfect just because the one ideal outcome was achieved? Roswaal makes love less about protecting people and more about forcing reality to match his obsession. And when love becomes that obsessive, well, it stops being love. It becomes possessive. Especially in Roswaal's case, it becomes a justification for cruelty. He makes it so clear that chasing one ideal future can distort love into something disgusting. That is why Roswaal is written so well as a warning for Subaru. Through Roswaal, season 2 part 1 shows the second danger of chasing the perfect route. Love can become obsession. Roswaal represents a possible future where Subaru's devotion decays into possessiveness, where saving one person or reaching that one ideal future becomes an excuse to sacrifice everyone and everything else. So he is not just Subaru's enemy, he is his warning. And that brings us to Betty. If Echidna shows the first danger of trauma becoming information, and Roswell shows the second danger of love becoming obsession, Betty shows the third and final danger of chasing the perfect route. Purpose can become imprisonment. Betty challenges the perfect route by showing that purpose can become a prison when someone waits for meaning instead of choosing it for themselves. I have to say, first of all, Betty is yet another one of the best parts of Season 2 Part 1. When I first met her, I thought she was a typical tsundere. Pretty blunt, very strong-willed, and for a while she seemed like this endearingly stubborn character who just happened to be ridiculously powerful. But then Season 2 Part 1 came along and started changing how we saw her, and it is all because of that damn book. When Subaru's heart dropped, my heart dropped with him. Out of nowhere, she stopped being the tsundere librarian we all know and love. To be fair, after everything Subaru went through with the witch cult, anything remotely similar to Betelgeuse's book is obviously going to feel villainous. So when we find out Betty was connected to a book like that, it makes us question everything. Was she always out to get Subaru? Is this yet another betrayal from someone who is part of our inner circle? Is she another Roswell? This is where the writing gets so good, because the more we learn, the more tragic Betty becomes. She is far from evil, she is trapped. Her life this entire time has been shaped by her book, by a promise, by the hope that a fateful someone would eventually arrive and give her existence meaning. That is why Betty is so important to this whole idea of the perfect route. She shows the passive version of this obsession. She is not active like Echidna or Roswell. She is not trying to force the world toward one future. She is frozen in place, waiting for that one future to arrive. And that makes her another possible future for Subaru, because Return by Death could also trap him inside a role. If everyone else's survival were to become his only goal, Subaru's own life would stop belonging to him. We see the early makings of that in episode 7, when Subaru first discovers Betty's connection to her book. But the tragedy is that the book is not evidence that Betty is controlling others like Roswell. It is evidence that the book is controlling her. For Betty, the book becomes the one thing she has attached her entire purpose to, the one thing she truly trusts, the one thing she expects to tell her what life is supposed to mean. She has spent so long waiting for meaning that she no longer knows how to live without the book. In that same episode, Betty and Subaru actually strengthen their connection when she saves him from the mansion. This should be a good thing, right? But no, for us it feels wrong, because Subaru did not want to be saved. He wanted to die and reset so that he could keep chasing the perfect route where everyone survives. And that creates such an important conflict. For Subaru, death has become a way to keep chasing that perfect route. Death has become the method. So when Betty interrupts his death, she is not just saving Subaru's life, she is interrupting the role Subaru is starting to force himself into. That is why his reaction is so disturbing. This man got angry because someone saved his life. That alone shows how decayed Subaru's mindset has become, how little value he's beginning to place on his own life, when his ideal outcome demands sacrifice. In Subaru's mind, his life is no longer the priority. The route is the priority. Saving everyone else is the priority. His own survival only matters if it helps him reach the correct future. That is where Betty and Subaru start to mirror each other. Both of them are trapped, but in completely different ways. Betty is trapped, waiting for someone else to give her life meaning. Subaru is trapped, sacrificing himself because he believes his life only has meaning if he can save everyone else. That is why Betty's writing in Season 2 Part 1 works so well. She is a warning about what happens when a role replaces an actual life. And by the end of Season 2 Part 1, that tragedy becomes even clearer. Betty's pain is not just loneliness, it is the fact that her entire life has been built on an empty promise. Her life effectively stopped when she was told that a fateful someone would eventually arrive and give her purpose. And after 400 years of waiting, that empty promise became a cage she could not bring herself to leave. She lived all this time, and yet emotionally, she barely moved at all. She was waiting for the script to give her the answer, but when it stopped giving her one, she did not know how to choose an answer for herself. This role has trapped her for so long that it has stopped feeling like purpose and started feeling like imprisonment. And this matters so much for Subaru because if he lets Return by Death decide his path, if he lets Echidna validate his suffering, if he lets Roswell convince him that sacrifice is a necessity, then he risks becoming like Betty, someone with a role but no true life. Someone who exists for one outcome, someone who stops asking whether the future he is chasing is actually his. So through Betty, Season 2 Part 1 shows the third and final danger of chasing the perfect route. Purpose can become imprisonment. Betty represents the future, where Subaru stops choosing a life for himself and becomes trapped inside a role. She shows that living for one ideal outcome can become a cage when you stop asking whether that future is actually yours. Season 2 Part 1 shows that the scariest part of chasing the perfect outcome is not failing to reach it, it is what you become while trying to get there. But recognizing that danger didn't automatically teach him how to escape it. To stop treating death as the answer, Subaru first had to accept something he had spent the entire series up to this point rejecting, that his own life was worth protecting too, and that strength means sometimes receiving help instead of carrying everything alone. Subaru's redemption begins when he learns that dying for Amelia is not the same as living as her knight, because a knight who values his own life so little can't fully honor the lives he claims to protect. By the end of Season 2 Part 1, Subaru is met with the possibility that every timeline he abandoned might have continued without him, leaving everyone else behind to grieve his death. That completely changes how we should look at Return by Death. Subaru's constant deaths can look like heroic sacrifices. He takes on pain that nobody else remembers, so everyone around him can survive. But underneath that heroic nature is the fact that Subaru can't imagine himself as part of the happy ending. Whenever reality becomes less than ideal, Return by Death transforms his helplessness into control. Subaru can just destroy himself, act like the failure never happened, and try to replace it with something better. The problem is not simply that dying hurts. Subaru has downplayed his own life to a resource whose only value is what it can accomplish for Amelia. That is why Satella telling him to love himself matters. A knight will obviously risk his life, but trying his hardest to stay alive is also an act of loyalty to everyone who cares about him. Subaru can't properly serve Amelia while treating himself like a weapon that can be thrown away whenever the current timeline fails. Since death can no longer be the answer, Subaru needs something to replace it. And this is where Otto the GOAT comes in. My MVP for this season. Otto smacks Subaru right across the face for trying to say that he has already tried every possible method when he never once asked one of his closest boys for help. Subaru isolating himself can look selfless at first, but Otto exposes the pride underneath that isolation. Subaru assumes that because nobody can understand everything he has experienced, nobody can meaningfully help him. And that belief keeps Subaru within the role he secretly wants, to be the irreplaceable hero carrying the weight of the world alone. The exact same role he wants to play in Amelia's life. But Otto proves that even though he can't share Subaru's memories, he can still share his burden. Otto teaches Subaru that support does not need perfect understanding, it needs trust. And Subaru accepting that help is his first genuinely knightly act. He shows humility and actually becomes more dependable when he finally allows himself to depend on somebody else. That lesson is immediately put into full effect when Subaru makes his bet with Roswell. He promises to save the sanctuary and everyone back in the mansion in this current life. No more relying on Return by Death. Roswell expects Subaru to keep spamming his ability until he gets his desired reality, but Subaru completely rejects that logic. His confidence here is so badass. It is Roswell who represents the final form of Subaru's original fantasy, the belief that loving one person deeply can justify controlling and sacrificing everyone else. And Subaru's bet is his complete rejection of that belief. He stops using death as a backup plan, and removing plan B means placing his complete faith in plan A. His courage no longer comes from being willing to die over and over. It comes from acting without a guaranteed future and believing that this current attempt, no matter how imperfect, deserves his full commitment. Subaru is not promising that he will eventually discover a timeline where he wins. He is standing behind his word in this one. So while Julius might possess traditional knightly courage through strength and discipline, Subaru begins developing his own form of knighthood through loyalty to the lives directly in front of him. The most knightly thing Subaru does here is not risking his life for Amelia. He has always been willing to do that. It is finally accepting that his own life is also part of what he has promised to protect. Once Subaru stops relying on death to guarantee the future, he can stop forcing Amelia to depend on him to face hers. Instead of trying to be Amelia's strength, he begins helping her develop strength of her own. That change becomes obvious during their argument in the graveyard. Subaru doesn't pretend that Amelia is perfect. He tells her to her face that she is stubborn and always trying to run away, but he still believes in her anyway. And their argument eventually ends with their first real kiss. Unlike the first fake one, I was actually geeked. Like his mum said, it is all about how it ends. And bro ended the argument with a kiss. Smooth bastard. Season 1 Subaru placed Amelia on a pedestal, which stopped him from supporting the real person behind his ideal. Blind praise could never give Amelia real confidence because she could always just dismiss it as Subaru loving a flawless, imaginary version of her. But here, Subaru admits that Amelia pisses him off and still chooses to believe in her. That makes his support way more convincing because it is no longer built on pretending she has no faults. He does not just comfort her until she feels safe again. He challenges her because Amelia's future will inevitably force her to act when Subaru is not beside her saying that she can. The clearest visual representation of this growth comes when Subaru covers the tomb's walls with messages for her. He gives Amelia something she can carry into the trial without entering it with her. He can't accept her memories for her. He can't overcome her fear for her. Only Amelia can do that. And so his words support her even when he is not there. Past Subaru wanted to chime into every important moment involving Amelia, with the role selection being the clearest example. Back then, not being present would have felt like surrendering control and accepting that he might not be the person she needed most. But now, he limits himself on purpose. Amelia could never have discovered how capable she is if Subaru kept proving that she needed him to act. Ironically, Subaru helps her the most by physically doing less and removing himself from the center of the solution. He helps Amelia believe that victory can come through her own hands. And eventually, she proves him right. Amelia rejects the comforting illusion offered by the second trial, confronts the terrifying futures shown by the third, and completes the trials through choices that are entirely hers. So the important point is not simply that Amelia passes, it is how she passes. She refuses to trade reality for fake comfort, even though reality has so much pain and no guarantee that everything will work out. That mirrors Subaru's rejection of endless resets. Both stop chasing the perfect future and commit themselves to an imperfect present. Subaru helped create the foundation that allowed Amelia to move forward, but Amelia earns that growth herself. Her growing trust in herself is not evidence that Subaru has become less useful. It is evidence that his support is finally working. And this is the specific way Subaru surpasses Julius as Amelia's knight. Julius is still the stronger, more experienced, and more traditional knight, but Subaru understands Amelia well enough to recognize when she needs protection, and when protecting her means taking a step back. Subaru becomes a better knight for Amelia than Julius, not because she could never survive without him, but because his support helps her discover that she can. Season 1 Subaru wanted Amelia to rely on him because being needed made him feel worthy. Season 2 Subaru finally becomes worthy by helping her need him less. Now Subaru finally earns the title of knight when he stops basing his worth on how much he can accomplish alone and instead builds a path to victory that relies on Amelia's strength and the choices of everyone around her. Past Subaru treated responsibility like it meant carrying every burden himself, even when he clearly did not have the strength to do it. But now, Subaru's value comes from understanding who should handle each battle and where everyone's strengths belong. Amelia is not sitting around waiting for Subaru to finish the real plan. Completing the trials is one of the most important parts of it, and Garfield, Ram, and the others are not just chess pieces for Subaru to control. They all act for their own reasons. Subaru Subaru's strategy works because he understands those reasons and builds around them instead of trying to control everyone like a puppet master. He goes from this desperate solo player into the glue guy, holding the team together. Because Subaru's weird strength as a knight is not combat. Let's be real, Julius has his number every day of the week in that regard. But Subaru's strength is recognizing value in other people and bringing their different abilities together into one plan that can actually work. Sometimes, serving her means physically standing in front of her and fighting, but it also means helping build a faction strong enough to support her future even when he isn't around. The Great Rabbit fight makes this change most obvious. Subaru can't win by spamming Return by Death until he figures everything out. He needs Betty's power, and he trusts Amelia herself with an essential role in the plan. Their shared victory does not make Subaru less impressive. It proves that he has finally overcome his need to be irreplaceable. Subaru does not just stand in front of Amelia anymore. He helps create the environment for Amelia and the rest of her faction to stand beside him on the battlefield. This successful timeline exists because everyone relies on each other. Subaru earns knighthood by serving Amelia's entire cause, not by making himself the only person capable of holding it together. He becomes her most important supporter among many, and that is why the final ceremony hits so hard. Amelia finally recognizes Subaru as her knight, and this time he does not give himself the title before she chooses him. In season 1, Subaru expected his devotion, or really his obsession, to excuse his behavior despite giving Amelia almost no reason to see him as her knight. In season 2, he carries the responsibility first, and only then does he receive the title. That reversed order transforms the ceremony from simply fulfilling a wish into redemption. And Amelia has changed too. Subaru does not force himself into a position beside some helpless princess. A stronger Amelia chooses the person she wants serving her. She chooses Subaru as her number one, not her only one, and that confirms both of them have grown. Subaru has learned to serve Amelia without replacing her strength, while Amelia has become strong enough to define their relationship herself. Now we know traditional perfection is not what Amelia needs most. Subaru earns his place because he understands her weaknesses, believes in her potential, and helps turn that potential into independence. The title does not suddenly make Subaru worthy. It acknowledges that he has already done the work needed to become worthy. Yes, Julius looked like a knight way before Subaru did, but Subaru becomes the better knight for Amelia by learning something his season 1 self could not understand. His job is not to become the hero she cannot live without. It is to serve the strength that allows her to live and lead for herself. And that is why season 2 part 2 is peak rezero. Its most important lesson is one about love. That truly supporting someone does not mean making them more dependent on you. It means giving them the freedom to become stronger themselves and helping them get there. And season 3 part 1 takes that lesson from Amelia to an entire city. In Prestella, Subaru finally becomes the hero he once only pretended to be. Not by standing above everyone as their Superman, but by standing among them and helping them believe that their own strength mattered too. Reinhardt is basically what happens when you turn up every stat slider to max during character creation to build the perfect player. Well, maybe not intelligence. He is powerful, dependable, and whenever he appears, it feels like the problem should immediately be over. But season 3 part 1 wastes absolutely no time showing us that overwhelming power still can't save everyone when the person using it doesn't fully understand the threat. After Subaru gets packed up twice by Sirius, the Sin Archbishop of Wrath, he finally accepts that he can't beat her alone and gets his boy Reinhardt to pull up. And the moment Reinhardt arrives, it feels like all is well. Sirius was just terrorizing an entire crowd and dangling this poor little boy who had everyone laughing at him while he pissed himself. Then Reinhardt arrives in this loop and dismantles her like she's nothing. This is exactly what most people imagine when they think of a hero. He enters an impossible situation, completely overpowers the villain, and it looks like everything has been solved instantly. But that is the dangerous thing about Reinhardt. His presence invites sorriness. The moment he appears, everyone, including Subaru, assumes his power will solve everything. Why wouldn't they? Reinhardt is so far above the average Joe that he can perform feats that nobody else would even attempt for like 2 seconds. Everyone can relax. Then Reinhardt splits Sirius in half, which splits the entire crowd in half. Rat's authority connected her to everyone physically and emotionally. emotionally. So Reinhardt's victory really made everyone die. He defeated the enemy but failed to actually save a single person. It might be time to put Reinhardt on fraud watch, and that difference matters. Reinhardt's power isn't the problem. I glaze this guy every time he appears on screen. I love me some Reinhardt, but even though he can overpower Sirius physically, he can't overpower the emotional connection between her and the crowd. So this season, ReZero takes its Superman-like hero, lets him put on a masterclass, and then immediately forces us to ask, did he actually save anyone? Power is only one part of being a true hero. Before acting for someone else, maybe a hero should understand what that person actually needs. Reinhardt pretty much pulled up and started boxing right away, and that isn't the only time his power fails to solve the situation. When Heinkel takes Felt hostage, the strongest man in the world is suddenly no longer the strongest man in the world. He can defeat a Sin Archbishop. He can defeat Elsa, the Bow Hunter. But daddy issues? Subaru saved me! His responsibility as Felt's knight prevents him from helping with the larger issue. It is yet another situation he can't brute force. And this is where Otto, the real GOAT, comes in. Otto can't match Reinhardt physically, but he has exactly what Reinhardt needs: the intelligence and resourcefulness to create an opening. His distraction allows Reinhardt to save Felt and quickly return to the fight against the witch cult. The stronger character needs the supposedly sorrier character to act. So Pristella can't survive by sitting around and waiting for Reinhardt to handle everything. Even he needs other people to recognize that their abilities matter and to choose to use them. Reinhardt makes people believe that his power will save them, but no amount of individual power can replace understanding and people acting together. What Pristella needs is not only a hero who stands above them, it needs a hero capable of standing among them. And this is where Subaru separates himself from Reinhardt. After Sirius kills Subaru for the third time through Reinhardt's nasty team wipe, Subaru comes back knowing two things: he can't do this alone, and he definitely can't blindly rely on Reinhardt to do it all. So what does he do? He looks to Betty for help. There is no pride. He is way past that. Subaru explains what he knows, Betty is with it, no questions asked, and Emilia wants in on the action too. Everybody brings something to the table. Betty understands shadow magic better than Subaru ever could. Emilia has upgraded her ice game like crazy, and Subaru, using his information from previous loops, has the game sense to IGL the team and bring everything together. He isn't standing above the bros as the answer to everything. He is one piece of the puzzle, and he knows it can't be completed without everyone else. But Season 3 Part 1 does not just test Subaru's ability to trust other people. It tests whether he can keep fighting for a reality that keeps getting suckier. Because this timeline is beyond cooked. Emilia, Shorty, gets taken away. Betty has to heal a literal chunk missing from Subaru's leg. Garfield returns carrying Mimi, Homegirl, on the brink of death. Then Capella, the Sin Archbishop of Lust, tricks Subaru into entering a room to rescue the hostages, only to start laughing her ass off and reveal that she already turned all of them into flies. That ish is villainous, and somehow she still isn't done. After the whole Capella and Krush goon bait situation, she rips off Subaru's leg and infects both him and best girl Krush with dragon blood.
I am having a very bad day!
Why does Krush keep getting hoed? At this point, I'm convinced Subaru has to reset anytime now. Then everything keeps getting worse. He gets separated from Krush, thrown into the flood by Capella, and has to be saved by Priscilla and Liliana. And when he wakes up, instantly more bad news. The witch cult now controls most of Pristella. Capella has made more demands. Emilia is still missing. This timeline sucks. But despite all that, Subaru is still standing on business. He declares that he will save everyone. He will defeat every enemy, and he will reach the happy ending no matter what. That hope matters because it doesn't come from an invincible hero pretending everything is under control. It comes from someone who knows exactly what helplessness feels like and chooses to keep fighting anyway. Subaru never treats this timeline like a bad run that can simply be overwritten with another save file. He keeps looking for a path forward. And that proves what he learned in season 2 has really stuck with him. Subaru no longer believes every tragedy has to be erased for life to be worth living. Sometimes a true hero can't undo the damage. Sometimes being a hero means protecting what is still here and respecting the sacrifices that have already shaped the present. So instead of ending himself until he finds the perfect timeline, Subaru chooses to thug it out alongside everyone else. He accepts the same horrible reality that everyone else has to live in. Subaru is not asking average people to become Reinhardt. He is showing them that someone who feels the same fear, pain, and powerlessness can still get back up and do something for themselves. His weakness does not stop him from becoming Pristella's hero, it makes his hope feel doable. And because the people can see themselves in Subaru, his decision to keep standing can eventually inspire them to stand too. Before Subaru speaks to the entire city, Liliana gives us a taste of what is about to do. Inside one of the shelters, Rat's authority is making everyone lose their minds, and who would have thought that Liliana would go all High School Musical on them? Somehow, the power of song breaks through Rat's influence. That is a freaking insane feat. Liliana is nowhere near Reinhardt physically. She could throw her ukulele at Sirius and maybe tickle it before getting no-diffed, but her singing reaches people in a way that Reinhardt's sword never could. This season, ReZero keeps expanding its definition of power. Some people box, some people lead, some people go full Alexander Hamilton, I guess. Everybody brings something different to the table, and a true hero doesn't overshadow those abilities. They recognize them. Liliana proves inside one shelter what Subaru is about to prove across Pristella, that the city will not be saved by one overpowered character doing everything. It will be saved by different people contributing something only they can provide. And Subaru's greatest ability might just be making even the average Joe believe that their contribution matters too. When the group decides to use the meteor to fight back against the bad vibes spreading across Pristella, Subaru becomes the clear choice to deliver the message. Season 1 Subaru would have forced his way onto the mic to prove he was that guy to Amelia. He would have got cooked by everyone for even trying. But Season 3 Subaru doesn't force himself into the role of hero. Other people choose him. Garfield recommends him. Anastasia and Julia support the decision, and Al supports whatever Subaru chooses to do. These people have seen Subaru at his worst, and yet he's still here. Now they trust him to give Pristella what it needs in its darkest moment. And Subaru's speech works because he doesn't pretend to be Reinhardt. He doesn't act like he can solve everything alone. He admits that he's far from perfect, that he's scared, and that there are things he hates about himself, but he chooses to hope anyway. Because Subaru sounds like an actual person instead of an all-powerful superhero, the people can see themselves in him. Someone who is scared can still stand. Someone who feels powerless can still contribute. Someone who hates themselves can still hope. Subaru takes a city waiting for one powerful person to save it and makes its people believe they can help save themselves and each other. Then, to cap off Season 3 Part 1, that hope becomes action. Subaru organizes the counterattack by matching everyone with the opponent best suited to them. Wilhelm and Garfield take on the Corpse Soldiers, Julius and Ricardo take on the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, and Subaru teams up with Reinhardt to take on Regulus, the Sin Archbishop of Greed. Even Priscilla the Tsundere is so moved by Subaru's resolve that she volunteers to take on Sirius. Again, everyone brings something different to the table. Reinhardt brings his usual overwhelming power. Liliana brings the power of song and friendship. Priscilla brings her cool-ass yang sword. The others bring their reliable skill and experience, and Subaru once again brings information and strategy. But most importantly, Subaru recognizes all these different forms of power and uses his leadership to bring them together. He doesn't replace Reinhardt, he fights beside him, because the better hero isn't necessarily the person who has it all. It's the person who makes everyone around them believe that their own power matters too. Reinhardt makes people believe in his power, but Subaru gives them hope to believe in their own. And that is what makes Subaru the better hero for Pristella. But becoming a genuine hero didn't mean Subaru had to want less. It meant learning how to want more without turning desire into entitlement or making suffering the price for achieving it. Against the Sin Archbishop of Greed, that same hunger became something much healthier. The drive to keep working, changing, and trusting others until everyone could reach for something better together. Subaru's greed reveals itself through one simple belief. He refuses to ever accept impossible as the final answer. And against Regulus, he has every reason to. Regulus uses his own wives as hostages, chokes out Amelia, and then seemingly kills Reinhard with a single attack. At this point, Subaru has absolutely no business stepping into this fight. He is one wrong move away from getting deleted, but he charges in anyway. Not because he suddenly thinks he can replace Reinhard, not because he believes he can overpower Regulus. Subaru trusts that Reinhard will revive and save Amelia while he moves to protect Sylvie. That difference matters. Early game Subaru would have treated being the weakest person there as proof that he had nothing to offer. Mid game Subaru searches for the role only he can fulfill. He doesn't need to become Reinhard. He just refuses to be useless. And that mindset becomes the entire reason he starts figuring Regulus out. Amelia and Reinhard hit him with everything they have and nothing works. More power is clearly not the answer. So instead of losing it and thinking, well, it is what it is, Subaru treats every failure as another stack of evidence. On some Sherlock Holmes timing, Subaru starts piecing everything together, with Amelia and Reinhard giving him the final clues. Amelia tells him about Regulus's reputation as the Little King, and Reinhard confirms that he has no heartbeat. Subaru then connects both details to the Sin Archbishop star-based names, and suddenly he is dismantling Lion's Heart and Little King, one clue at a time. Like, bro, how many plans deep are we? We literally watch Reinhard execute Plan K, which means Subaru has been in the lab like his life depends on it. Every failure creates another question. Every question creates another plan, and every plan brings them closer to an answer. And that is where Subaru becomes quote-unquote greedier than Regulus. Regulus's greed is reflected perfectly through his authority. It allows him to remain untouched by the world. Nothing can change him, and that is exactly how he wants it. Subaru's version of greed is the complete opposite. It keeps him moving so that he's constantly observing, questioning, and adapting to the world. Regulus has survived for so long by refusing to change. Subaru wins this fight because he never stops changing. And eventually, all of that work leads to the one answer raw strength could never provide. When Regulus attaches his heart to Amelia's own heart, it is not Reinhard's overwhelming power or Amelia's insane magic that saves her. It is invisible providence. The very ability Subaru hates using. That is what makes this moment so important. Subaru doesn't keep striving because he believes he can do everything. He keeps striving because he believes there is always something he can do. Even a power he finds so disgusting can become valuable when the situation specifically calls for it. Subaru still desperately wants to feel useful. We all do. The difference is that he no longer forces himself into every role just to prove that he matters. He finds the role that actually belongs to him. His greed has matured into drive. He reaches beyond impossible by using everything available to him. His intelligence, Slot's authority, and the strengths of the people beside him. He rejects helplessness, turns failure into information, and finds a path forward without treating return by death as the answer. But finding his own role is only half of Subaru's growth. The bigger change is that he has truly stopped believing every role has to be his. Refusing to accept limits doesn't mean Subaru thinks he has none. It means he has learned that some limits can only be overcome by trusting somebody else to do what he can't. Once Subaru realizes that Regulus's invincibility as the Little King is connected to the wives inside his little kingdom, he doesn't try to handle every part of the plan himself. He gives the most important job to Amelia. Her role is to find Regulus's wives, earn their trust, and then break the connection behind his supposed invincibility. Subaru stays behind to rage bait Regulus, exposing his authority directly to his face so that Amelia can execute the real win con. And that choice says everything about how much Subaru has changed. He doesn't send Amelia away because he thinks she is some fragile princess who needs to be protected from the real fight. He sends her there because her magic and ability to connect with these women make her the perfect person for it. Subaru trusts Amelia with the game-winning shot.
The Martians have the death beam pointed at Earth, you better hit it.
Because he knows she can do something he can't. Early Subaru would have thought,
what about me?
Current Subaru thinks she is exactly why we can win. And this is where his drive completely separates itself from Regulus's greed. His little kingdom only survives by stripping away everyone's freedom. He treats his wives like possessions with the sole purpose of serving his comfort and desires. Subaru works in the exact opposite way. He gives people the freedom to act. He trusts them to make their own decisions, take their own risk, and contribute in ways that only they can. And that is why no single character owns this victory. Emilia helps the wives stand up for themselves, not to mention she also hits Regulus with the Neji 64 palms technique as payback for them. Pure satisfaction. Subaru removes Regulus's black heart from Emilia's. Then Reinhard delivers a generational ass beating after jumping off the frickin' moon. Everybody matters. And Subaru no longer needs everybody's role to belong to him. Don't get it twisted. He still aims for an insanely ambitious result. He wants to defeat a supposedly untouchable Sin Archbishop, save Emilia from that same man, and free every woman Regulus has terrorized for who knows how long. But now he chooses trust over self-destruction. Subaru still has the drive to chase the best outcome possible, but he no longer needs all the credit. He no longer believes he has to carry every burden by himself. Season 2 didn't teach Subaru to want less. It taught him that reaching for more means recognizing how many people are needed to carry the weight. The best future is no longer something Subaru suffers into existence alone. It is something he helps everyone create together. And that willingness to share the future is exactly what separates Subaru's drive from Regulus's entitlement. Because both of these guys want more, but the difference is how they treat those desires. Regulus believes wanting something means he deserves to have it. Subaru believes wanting something means he has to keep working for it. And Regulus makes that entitlement painfully obvious. He threatens to kill his own wives, toys with Reinhard's life, and completely dismisses Emilia's feelings because he has already decided she is the bride he deserves. Regulus doesn't see these people as, well, people with desires of their own. His partners are proof that the world revolves around him. He expects reality to satisfy every desire of his without ever demanding that he change. That is what makes him the pure definition of greed. Then we have Subaru, who is nothing like Regulus but is somehow greedier. Subaru wants an arguably equally outrageous future, but never acts like the world owes it to him. He changes his plans accordingly. He accepts his limits. He trusts people to do what he can't and continues working with whatever reality throws at him. Regulus believes wanting more means deserving more. Subaru believes wanting more means doing more. And the end of season 3 proves that Subaru's drive isn't just another entitled demand for the perfect timeline. Because even though they win, it isn't a clean victory. The Sin Archbishops of Gluttony once again leave behind damage the heroes aren't able to undo. Roy consumes Julius's name. What do you mean, who's Julius? And Subaru becomes the only person who still remembers him. That's tough. The Knight Among Knights, the man with more pride than almost anybody, has been completely forgotten. And to make it slightly worse, the only person who remembers him is his best friend / frenemy. Even after everything they work so hard to achieve, the future remains painful, and Subaru has to live with that. That matters because early Subaru would have treated this imperfect result as an excuse to suffer more. I mean, heck, he tried it with Rem. Die, try again, die, try again. But that isn't what his greed looks like anymore. Subaru can accept that this is the best future they reached in that moment. He can still value every life they saved while continuing to fight for Julius, Rem, and everyone else who remains unsaved. He doesn't abandon the future because it is imperfect. He just refuses to believe it can't still become better. So his greed never disappeared. It matured into drive. But after the entire series had built this version of Subaru we all know and love, it took away the memories that allowed him to recognize that person as himself. Without them, Natsuki Subaru became a heroic figure whose relationships and achievements Amnesia Baru had inherited, along with impossible expectations he didn't believe he deserved. So the final test was no longer whether Subaru could become a better person. It was whether that person still existed when Subaru himself could no longer remember becoming him. Julius proves that identity can survive being forgotten because even after the entire world loses every memory of his name, he continues making the choices that define him as a knight. Gluttony might have erased the man known as Julius Euculius from everyone else's mind, but Julius doesn't stop being Julius. He still remembers his values, his responsibilities, the people he wants to protect. So despite losing his reputation, his relationships, and basically every receipt proving he was ever important, he still joins the mission to the Watchtower. He still wants to save the victims of gluttony and lust. This is why the world forgetting Julius doesn't automatically turn him into someone else. His identity survives through the choices he continues to make. The problem is that when nobody remembers the person you spent years becoming, eventually you start wondering whether that person was ever real. And Reed makes that insecurity infinitely worse. After Reed completely suns him, Julius secretly returns to challenge him again and again and again, getting folded every single time. At this point, Julius isn't only trying to pass the trial for the squad, he's trying to prove that the forgotten man known as Julius Euculius still exists. Nobody remembers his achievements, nobody remembers his title. So Julius thinks surely one individual masterclass might finally make him feel like himself again. But Subaru carrying him away after the fight offers a completely different answer. Julius doesn't need to defeat Reed to prove who he is. Subaru sees him at his lowest and still values him anyway. For once, Julius doesn't have to uphold the image of the knights among knights. He allows someone to see his complete and vulnerable self. This makes it all the more cruel when Season 4 Part 1 takes even that away from him. When Subaru wakes up with amnesia, Julius realizes that the only person who still remembered him has now forgotten him too. Brother is sick to his stomach. Julius hasn't actually changed, but the final living connection to his old identity has suddenly disappeared. Subaru was the only person left who could confirm that Julius's relationships, achievements, and reputation had ever existed. Now, Julius is left carrying an identity that only he can remember. This is why being forgotten doesn't erase who someone is, but it can erase every relationship that once made that identity feel real. But Anastasia faces the opposite problem. Julius loses everyone's recognition while remaining the same person underneath. Anastasia keeps everyone's recognition while someone else controls the body they recognize as hers. She and Foxidna prove that identity can't be reduced to someone's name, face, or body because the person making the choices matters more than the body carrying them out. Subaru finds out that the person walking around in Anastasia's body is actually the artificial spirit he calls Foxidna. Meanwhile, the real Anastasia is asleep somewhere inside, while every moment Foxidna remains in control eats away at her life. And this is where Season 4 Part 1 answers the age-old question: are you more than a
small waist, pretty face with a big bang?
Apparently yes, because everything the world uses to recognize Anastasia is still standing right there. Her face, her body, her name, and yet Anastasia herself is missing. Everyone can keep treating that face like Anastasia, but their recognition is being directed toward the wrong consciousness. Foxidna can imitate the external signs of Anastasia's identity, but she can't automatically inherit the person Anastasia became through her own choices. And then Season 4 Part 1 makes that distinction even messier. During Julius's first fight with Reed, Foxidna puts Anastasia's body on the line to save him, pushing herself so far that the body starts collapsing. That choice looks exactly like something Anastasia would do. After all, Julius is her knight. Of course she would want to protect him, but acting like Anastasia doesn't suddenly make her Anastasia. The choice still comes from a different consciousness, while the consequences are being suffered by a body that doesn't belong to her. If anything, it proves that Foxidna isn't some cheap imitation. She's developing an identity of her own. The problem is that her identity is being expressed through someone else's life. And that truth becomes even more brutal when Julius finds out. As Anastasia's knight, he is devastated that the woman he swore to serve had disappeared right in front of him and he never even noticed. Foxidna's face doesn't change after the confession. Her voice doesn't change, her body doesn't change. What changes is Julius's understanding of the person standing in front of him. The relationship he thought he was rebuilding with Anastasia had actually been middleman through somebody else. His connection with Foxidna might still have been real, but it wasn't a connection with Anastasia. Julius still knows who he is, but nobody else does. Anastasia is still recognized by everyone else, but she can't control the identity they're recognizing. And then Season 4 Part 1 takes every identity crisis we've seen so far and gives Subaru the worst of both worlds. Amnesia Baru reveals Season 4 Part 1's most brutal truth. The person Subaru became survives in the lives he changed and the choices he's still capable of making. But without his memories, that identity feels like the life of a man better than himself. Everyone knows his name, everyone believes in him, but he's the only person who has no idea why. When Amnesia Baru wakes up without recognizing Amelia or Betty, he thinks he has been transported into another world for the first time. That tripped me out. Except, this isn't the same isekai experience Subaru had in Season 1. Season 1 Subaru arrived in Lagunica believing that being summoned there automatically made him special. He thought the world had chosen him, that he was obviously the main character only for reality to tell him.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Nobody knew him, nobody recognized him, so nobody had any reason to believe he mattered. Amnesia Baru enters the exact same world from the complete opposite position. This time everybody already knows his name. Whether it's Amelia, Betty, or Julius, the entire group treats him like somebody important. That means Amnesia Baru has somehow managed to inherit the exact heroic life that Season 1 Subaru dreamed of having. If only it were that easy. Because Amnesia Baru is in for the rudest awakening imaginable. He has no idea how he earned any of it. To Amnesia Baru, Natsuki Subaru stops feeling like his own name. It becomes the title of some legendary hero everybody expects him to be. A man who apparently saved countless lives, built strong relationships, survived impossible situations. The Subaru standing there can't even remember meeting them. So instead of feeling proud, he feels like a fraud. Fraud Baru. He has the life Season 1 Subaru wanted in the palm of his hand, but he has no emotional claim over it. And that insecurity only gets worse when he starts treating the quote-unquote real Subaru like a completely separate person. After Melee is slimed out, Amnesia Baru finds the words Natsuki Subaru was here carved into his arm like some sick joke. In real time, this has to be genuinely the most insane thing to discover when you're already losing it over whether this Natsuki Subaru guy is even you. Amnesia Baru starts believing that the real Subaru might have returned for a brief moment, taken control of his body, and choked out Melee without him knowing. Then Ram looks him in the face and basically confirms his worst fear. You are not the real Subaru. And this is where memory loss becomes a full identity crisis.
Identity theft is not a joke, Jim.
Amnesia Baru doesn't see his forgotten past as something he once experienced. He imagines Subaru as a separate consciousness, someone smarter than him, more capable than him, and potentially much more dangerous than him. At this point, his feelings toward the Subaru we know are a disgusting combination of jealousy and fear, because in his mind, this other Subaru apparently earned everybody's undying loyalty. He survived horrors Amnesia Baru couldn't begin to understand. He convinced Amelia, this silver-haired elven baddie, to trust him. He built a reputation so powerful that people continue believing in him even when he doesn't believe in himself. And instead of seeing those achievements as proof of what he's capable of, Amnesia Baru sees them as proof that he could never measure up to himself. The man everyone loves owns his name, his relationships, his entire life, while Amnesia Baru believes he's only the inferior, empty shell left behind. He's jealous of Subaru because Subaru has everything he wants, and he's terrified of Subaru because he has no idea what that beloved man is capable of. That's what makes Amelia finding him especially important, because when she tells him that she believes in him, Amnesia Baru can't accept it. Why would someone as bad as Amelia place that much faith in someone like him? Why would anybody? But Amelia doesn't give him his memories memories back. She can't hand over every experience they shared. It doesn't work like that. Instead, what she gives him is a reaffirmation of the relationship that survived those missing memories. She tells him everything they went through together. She tells him how much he means to her. And she tells him that she loves him. This is the confession we've been waiting for, and I'm absolutely here for it. For the first time, Amnesia Baru begins to understand why the real Subaru kept fighting. Not because he came into the world as some fearless chosen hero, but because he loves people enough to keep choosing them. And that is the most important thing Season 4 Part 1 is trying to say about identity. Amnesia Baru starts becoming Subaru again before his memories ever return. He doesn't take back his identity by remembering every achievement attached to his name. He starts reclaiming it by accepting his love for Amelia, by choosing to trust her, and by choosing to act on those feelings through the completely unreasonable goal of saving everyone, which is the most Subaru thing to do. The hero Amnesia Baru was so jealous of was never created by perfect memories. He was created every time Subaru chose to love somebody, every time he chose to trust someone enough to ask for help, every time he decided that saving one person wasn't enough. At first, Amnesia Baru believes that Natsuki Subaru is a better man whose life he has stolen. But by making those same choices, he starts proving that the heroic Subaru was never somebody else to begin with. Subaru was never just a collection of memories stored inside one body. He was the person who repeatedly chose to love others, trust them, and fight for them. His memories explained what he did. His relationships maintained the identity he built, but his choices prove who he is. That proves Subaru's growth was never stored only in his memories. Even after losing them, he still chose to trust, love, and save everyone. And that is why ReZero made me hate Subaru, then proved me wrong. His real journey was learning that his life mattered, even when he failed or couldn't save everyone. He never became perfect. He simply stopped treating himself as someone disposable. And ironically, once Subaru believed he was worth saving too, he became the genuine hero he had always tried to be. If you made it to the end, thank you for tuning in. Let me know how excited you are for Season 4 Part 2 in the comment section below. Also, it would mean a lot to me if you left a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe for more ReZero videos like this.